All right, I think I'm going to get started. My name is Jeff Adams. I'm the Community Development Director for City of Cannon Beach, and I got Robert St. Clair, planner, Cannon Beach. And we've been working on the transportation system plan, and I know many of you out there recognized by the names have been on many of the earlier open houses and been being a part of this process. And we appreciate everyone coming out, taking your time. Tonight, we want to just kind of update you on where we are in the project, and project still has a few months left. We hope to finish up in midsummer, and we will start making our way towards that. And we'll give you the timeline and the other important dates coming up here in just a moment. I also want to remind everybody, if you haven't been to our website, which is cannonbeachtsp.com. Please visit the website. And if you want the version with Eddie Montejo from our parametrics consulting team, he did this morning's presentation for the project advisory committee meeting. His versions will be posted as with all of our presentations. They're up on the website as well. And those can also be found on our meeting pages at the city's website. So feel free to check that out. If you have any questions, you can always ask me. And just for this meeting, just a few meeting guidelines to kind of go over. I've muted you on entry, but as we get into this process, if you want to speak or would like to comment or say something, feel free to raise your hand. That's down there as part of the Zoom access platform. You can toggle over down the bottom and just raise your hand. I would remind people though that after they raise their hand and they're called on, a lot of people don't realize that they have to also unraise their hand, go back and take down the hand. And so please do that after you speak or you've said what you need to say. I can always be reached at adams@ci.cannon-beach.or.us. And please keep your comments fairly brief. I mean, we'll have many opportunities to talk and be respectful of others during the meeting. So tonight's agenda, introduced ourselves already, but we'll be talking about the TSP in context, the work done to date, community outreach, our preferred alternatives, which is where we're at in the process, overview of those. We'll get into detail on a few things and discuss some of that, and then talk about the next steps, the online open house that'll be coming up in March, the final PAC meeting and fourth open house there also, like tonight's presentation, and then the draft TSP and the actual implementation process of the ordinances that will follow. So the TSP project, what is a TSP, a transportation system plan? Well, the transportation system plan addresses the needs now and into the future for 20 years, looking at all modes of transportation, including freight, including bicycle, public transit, all different modes, and trying to find solutions that offer connections and connectivity to all different aspects, what's often called the networked approach. So we assess the existing and future conditions, develop draft and preferred alternatives, and then we identify projects, programs, and policies and standards that will help implement those as we move forward. And then the final leg, which is often the most important, what are funding options and implementation strategies for moving these projects forward? And most importantly, and probably what I'm most excited about, this is Cannon Beach's first transportation system plan. Every other community in Clatsop County has had at least one transportation system plan. Some are in their third or fourth transportation system plan. What this does, it gives us the systems analysis, and it says, hey, this is where our gaps are. These are the needs that need to be filled. So what are Cannon Beach's needs? um, transportation solutions that preserve the village feel. What I often like to call location, location, location. And Cannon Beach is a special place. And we took that into account, and we heard that when we went out and did our community outreach time and time again. We want to keep that village character. We don't want it to turn into other places or a metro area or a tourism place. We want to keep that village feel. And so we need to balance the needs of the year-round residents, visitors, and those who do business in Cannon Beach, while keeping safety and comfort and the comfort of our pedestrians and biking connections throughout town. And we heard that time and again. Consistent and dedicated sidewalk paths in our corridors and street crossings and bike lanes that connect from the north tip to the south tips of Cannon Beach. And then access to evacuation routes and assembly areas. We kept one of the foremost in our, when we went out for this grant to get this transportation plan up and running, we talked about resiliency. It's the full spectrum of planning, and that it's not just about transportation and housing, but also in times of emergency and in times when we need to evacuate and move people safely away from danger. And so the profile of how we've gone about this, we have a project management team that is a consultant team along with staff and area experts. And then we branch up that those folks advise the project advisory committee, which met this morning for the third time. And it's state, local, and regional partners and professionals. And that project advisory committee, kind of a sounding board of some of the technical aspects, then they advise the planning commission, and our planning commission then recommends that on to city council. At each one of these levels, it's important that we have community feedback, and we continually iterate and go back out for more feedback after every one of these projects. Policies and projects. So what I like to state is that if you go out there to our project library page on the cannonbeachtsp.com, you'll see each one of the outreach memos, every one of the technical bulletins. We're up to technical bulletin number 6, which is the preferred alternatives. If you haven't read that, please do read that because that's what this is about. We want your input tonight, but you'll have at least a few more weeks before we start moving into drafting that final transportation system plan. So that's where we are. We started with the project launch back in January of 2021. We moved into spring 2021 with our first open house that focused on the goals, objectives, and existing conditions. In the summer, we reached back out with the second open house with future conditions and alternatives analysis. It was that first opportunity, looked at the different alternatives that are on the table. Now we're at the preferred alternatives. So after gathering input, looking at the different reports, we scoped out what are the preferred alternatives that we heard. And this is our first opportunity to get back. These are the priorities. And these are some of the costs that go along with those priorities. Like I said, in this spring and summer, we'll be running up to the actual transportation system plan, final draft and adoption. So as far as community engagement, back for milestone number 2, back in fall 2021, we shared surveys and went out to the public, and we went out twice because we got such great feedback from the first survey that the call was, hey, we've got a lot of parking issues. And it was such a lot of input on parking. We said, let's just do a special parking survey. And so we went back out for a second survey, which just focused down on the parking. And we produced a milestone 2 report, which is out there on the website. Project Advisory Committee number 2 met on September 22nd. Public Zoom webinar that evening. We had an online open house that also gathered more input. And then we had our first joint planning commission and city council workshop that gave us further direction on the feedback. So key findings, most participants, 57% agreed or strongly agree that the draft alternatives are right for Cannon Beach, including the proposed roadway alternatives in the downtown area. I don't know if everyone's familiar with a Wordle, but Wordle is pretty much taking all that public comment that we got back from all of our outreach. And like I said earlier, parking that's why it's so big. It ranks the Wordles rank the word order, and the larger the font when it comes back. And these are all the things that we heard about. We heard about the parking. We heard about village. We heard about the feel of the village, visitors, and safety. And it goes on and on. I recommend anyone read we've got actual documentation of just the public comment that came back from those feedbacks, and you can read through PDFs of just the feedback from the surveys. And so key findings that came back from the community engagement, appropriate improvements. Like I said, 50%, 7% said they believe that that they would improve. They agreed with the projects that were listed and the recommendations, but they also said they believe that it will improve travel and safety conditions. Strategic implementation. May want to consider testing out draft alternatives, conducting further studies on some projects. And so it was a balance solutions. And over again, we heard about balance, whether it's with tourism and residents, but safety as well. And safety we heard over and over again about safety in crossings, pedestrian safety, biking safety, ADA accessible safety issues, and then multimodal improvements, supportive of more transportation options, more connectivity between the transportation options, and of course, sustainability and resiliency, building the sustainability of the network and the resiliency to bounce back and also to get people out of harm's way when safety is an issue. We also heard quite a bit about keeping that kind of European village atmosphere with traffic, pedestrian levels, and safety. And that's by far the largest complaint is that peak of peak seasonal issues with the congestion, crowding, and safety issues that come by way of our summer seasons and are expanding with each year. Preferred alternatives. We gave various alternatives out there. We've got some pretty strong feedback on where to go next. Solutions that were identified through combination of technical analysis, coordination with the project management team, input from the joint meeting of the City Council Planning Commission, plus our project advisory group, and of course, our general public. In fact, today, I've received 3 different emails today with comments on suggested coming back after they've read through the preferred alternatives. So I'm getting them every day, feedback. We will be adding those to the website, combining those into public comment documents, uploading those. The project management team is aware of those, and those will be passed on as part of the public records to the decision makers when they finally look at these preferred alternatives. So like I said, this is where we are. We've identified the preferred alternatives. We're at the community input phase. We've gathered from this morning's pack some input, a couple of really good comments on that. Like I said, that's posted to the website tomorrow. So if you want to see that as well, you can watch that one. that considers costs, needs, and overall level of community support. Then we'll draft that into a transportation system plan. And then that will go out in draft form for at least 2 public meetings and another series and another round of open houses and online open houses. Preferred alternatives include transportation for all modes of the city. Like I said, pedestrian, bicycling, emerging transportation, parking management, as we identified as a huge need, and that works hand in hand with transportation demand management strategies. Also, transit, roadway improvements, freight, emergency response, and evacuation. So how does this work moving forward? Like I said, what you'll see in the document in that technical memo 6, the preferred alternatives, you'll see low cost, low impact measures that are all shorter term measures weighed against the higher cost, higher impact. Just like this shows the 4-way stops. We found alternatives range three-way and 4-way stop controls to many roundabouts. So you have that 3-way or 4-way recommendation, 4-way stop recommendation for Warren Way, first and second as a near-term solution. But the higher investment, maybe something we want to look at down the road at a higher investment, are many roundabouts at first and second. And so those costs are factored into the preferred alternatives plan. Because as we looked at we gathered feedback from the professionals and also from the public, we also ran models. And with those models, we found the baseline models for Hemlock failing now, failing in the future. And low cost alternatives can make a quick fix and should be able to alleviate some of those off of the side street turning onto the main street, some of those delays and some of those pedestrian delays and crossing delays and hazards. So there are short-term and low-cost solutions that we think might resolve a lot of what we see during the peak seasons. And as in many of what you'll hear tonight, we're looking at maybe pilot studies, iterations of certain things, and that's really what this boils down to. Step-by-step processes of offering solutions, transportation solutions that will improve safety and improve the network connectivity moving into the future. And someone said earlier, baby steps. I don't think it's baby steps. I think it's the giant leaps for mankind. Each one of these can make big gains. We just have got to take those steps one at a time, see how they play out. We may say some don't, but we'll find that many do, and may not even need that large term investment, long-term investment of the larger solution. So how might this play out? One of the things we kept hearing back, or one of the preferred alternatives, is a Hemlock first through the 3rd Pedestrian Plaza. You'll see that in the preferred scenario. And this is closing down the through traffic and to allow a pedestrian where seating, dining, shopping and pedestrians are put first. This could be implemented as a pilot study, then moved in seasonally or permanently if it all works out. We might find that it's not working in one area and it works on a different location. We can look at removing parking as a relatively low cost things in certain areas, or we might try, as we'll see some other alternatives, the one-way street couplets and other pilot studies. But as we heard in the joint meeting between the City Council and the Planning Commission, I think everybody was on board to look at this as a pilot program and a project to move forward. I mentioned the couplet situation. That's also in there as a recommendation, number 7, where one-way street along Hemlock going south loops back to a one-way street utilizing Spruce going north. between First and Third. And so these are solutions that where you might also get the bang for the buck, where you can also have biking and pedestrian improvements along Hemlock and Spruce in these areas, with parking improvements as well, and gain some parking. So another pilot project that seems promising moving forward. And then this is the list of those roadway alternatives. Originally, we had 7 proposed roadway projects. We whittled it down to these 5 preferred alternatives. And those include Hemlock, Warren, and First, Second, and Third projects. We've developed planning level cost estimates for each and assigned a timing of near, medium, or long term based on community priority and transportation benefit. That's what you'll see in that column with the dollar amounts, and followed by that. And so the near would be within the first 5 years, mediums 5 to 10 years, and we're looking at the long, that 10 to 20 year range. And like I said, just because it's listed doesn't mean that if we try that near for the intersection, say at First, that R4 intersection First and Hemlock, if that near we try the 4-way stop control and it works, that's $920,000 that we possibly save in the mini roundabout solution that is projected for 10, 20 years out. So before I get into on-street, get into the parking management, I just want to open up. If anybody has any thoughts or questions or would like to say anything, they can raise their hand. I'll be happy to unmute. If not, I'll just go on to the next segment, and at the end, I'll leave ample room for comments. So feel free to reserve it if you'd like to wait for that. All right, I'll move on into parking management. Like I said, that first thing is location, location, location. Well, what we heard back was parking, parking, parking. We continue to hear about parking. Just because it's the off season and we don't hear that much about it right now, let me tell you, we're just a few months away from parking being the #1 concern again. So parking management, we focused on the efficient use of the city's existing parking supply using cost-effective and scalable treatments. Time-restricted parking, and to do this requires enforcement. That's one thing that we kept hearing. You know, we talked about balance earlier. That's the balance that we have to think about as well when we go to these other measures. Nothing is always a win-win. We're going to have to also, when we make the decision to go into parking, if we do make that decision and go to parking management, we must realize that comes with the enforcement issue. And it looks like I have somebody, let me see, like MH Law One's iPad. Did you have something to say?
I just had this is Lila Wickham.
Hi, Lila.
And I just had a question before we got onto parking, because it's about safety.
Yeah.
In some communities like Haley, Idaho, they have little flags that the pedestrians carry across the street in the pedestrian parking, you know, in the parking area. And it seems to be effective in getting the visitor in particular to actually concentrate on what they're going to do next and signal that to the driver. And I wondered if we had thought about that. And my second comment is I was really glad to see that there's a four-way stop proposed at by Fresh Foods, because that is a horrific challenge.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody has ever thought about road bumps, they call them, because people where I live in Tolovana Park actually go like 40 and 50 miles an hour between Fresh Foods and the last exit.
Great. Thank you, Lila. I haven't heard the road bumps or I know we do mention rumble strips in portions of those. I believe those are more of just kind of the raised portions of the crosswalks. But yes, they use those quite frequently in other areas. And I'm glad you brought up Haley's flags. I lived for 7 years in Haley, Idaho, so very familiar with the flag system. I don't think anyone else has brought that up as well, but definitely something to think about and look into. And I do know the challenges of those flag systems as well, because they get stolen, get taken around town. So I do know how much that was always a concern and an issue of keeping up with those things. But it's another idea. It's something we'll bring up with our project management team and see if they have tested that anywhere around as well, and get the feedback on that. So thank you for that. So for parking management, like I said, we want better utilization of our off-street parking lots through a combination of incentives and programs to support minimizing driving between destinations in town, especially downtown tourist travel. That was suggested, and we heard that in our feedback. And then the transportation demand management strategies, such as programs to encourage visitors to tour Cannon Beach by foot. I know the North Coast travel is working on solutions like that. It was mentioned at our earlier meeting this morning that there may be some solutions that they're working on currently with Jim Pano and that group. But employee parking and offsite parking lots were also part of the remote overflow parking lots were also part of the preferred alternatives that were outlined as part of the solutions moving forward. And I think what was mentioned this morning at the project advisory committee meeting is that we know that parking is it's a very huge seasonal concern, but we also want to treat it with a respect of there may just be certain elements we want to try striping, for instance, limiting parking in certain areas. They brought up this morning permit parkings for residents or employees or business owners, so that we have some type of permitting system. So we were looking at all these, and the preferred alternatives speak to each one of these. If it's not in the parking, it'll be in the transportation demand management and other solutions that are out there. During our community engagement, we identified remote lots for employees and overflow visitor use, striping existing on-street parking stalls, instituting a parking permit program to regulate overall number of cars parking on street, imposing time restrictions for some on-street parking, need to recognize the city doesn't have any parking management today. So jumping straight into a permit parking program might not be the first solution that we throw out there. We might try others first, but all of them are on the table, and it will take some decisions to make after we come out with this transportation system plan on which direction the appointed leaders, the elected officials would like to go on these. And that's getting feedback at this phase is a key to seeing which way we want to go. So like I said, these are those mentioned. You'll see just kind of a dollar amount showing, hey, which are the most costly of these and which are the lower cost alternatives. There's 9 recommendation strategies out there. And like I said, it may take a few different approaches. And I see Kathy's got her hand up. Let me let her. Kathy?
Yes, hi, Kathy Klezik, and I just want to say that I don't see anywhere on here mentioned van pools and the potential of the city maybe getting involved in subsidizing van pools for employees to reduce the need for parking spots?
That's great, Kathy. I mean, we just got done mentioning, or I did, Haley, Idaho, and I know the Wood River Valley uses that quite a lot, van pooling. Thanks for bringing that up.
Because I mean, I know that individual businesses, it might be too much of a hurdle by themselves to think that they could subsidize a van pool for just their employees. But, you know, if we create employee groups with the different hotels or through the city, then that might actually end up being a great way to provide transportation that is transit-like without having to wait the years for the transit system to be able to fund, you know, additional special buses.
Right. And, you know, I think we'll get to it here in a little bit. You know, one of the big things was definitely people wanted to see more public transit. They want to see more of that. But yes, I know the constraints of doing that. And so lower cost alternatives, or at least cost shared alternatives, are a great approach to that. Thank you.
I mean, I think that more transit is a great goal. Unfortunately, right now, with the lack of drivers and the way that the funding system works, it could take a while for that to be able to be implemented, but van pools could happen fairly quickly. So I definitely want to keep saying van pool to keep that on the forefront.
Great. All right. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
And so some of the pedestrian and bicycle system preferred alternatives, they focus on improving the connectivity and safety and access, comfort of the city's integrated pedestrian and bicycle network. Spectrum of projects based on local context. Some are more capital intensive than others. What they want to keep cognizant, the kinds of improvements that can be made while respecting and preserving the village's character. So we've not recommended, I think, we've gotten tons of comments about don't pave our sidewalks. We make no recommendations on paving sidewalks or introducing more paved sidewalks. We do offer these kind of shared pathways where you can have a fairly improved shoulder, packed shoulder, to make them more biking and pedestrian friendly. And that's what at least could be a first step towards making them more accessible to all. And then the connectivity, of course, I've spoken about, but one of the concerns that I hear it's weekly, if not during the season, a lot of times during the day, is of course the safety of our crossings, specifically Haystack, some in the presidentials. There's not enough, they say, in the presidentials. So you'll see those preferred alternatives, suggestions, and crossings in the systems plan, the preferred, and make note of those, because I think those are some of the biggest gains that we'll get are better striping, better marking, better crossings, and different suggestions on how we go about that in the future. And like I said, for our key findings from the pedestrian system, multi-use paths and trails and side paths. We also heard this morning, and I think we hear it in the public comment as well, also better wayfinding signage, things that help connect those different paths. A lot of people have lived here for years and still didn't know that you can get along the Ecola back there. There's that pathway that goes back by the city park. I met somebody the other day that had lived here for over a year and did not know that exists. And so I think that a lot of people just don't know the network. And so getting that out there and improving that wayfinding system is also a key component moving forward. Bicycle system, we heard quite a bit. I think I saw Randy Neal was on this call. Others have also spoke up on bicycling and more safety, other routes or better routes or lower stress routes. I know when I have visitors in town, if it's during the season, I still don't feel comfortable showing them around town on bikes. I still prefer walking around showing somebody when I prefer taking them around on bikes. It'd be a lot quicker, a lot easier, but getting north to south or even through the downtown area on a bike during the summer season is a difficult and fairly unsafe thing. And so to make those kind of improvements are a key component going forward. And so you'll see those kind of highlighted in our preferred alternatives. There's 6 preferred and ranging in amounts. I would just want to kind of touch on in tonight's presentation, touch on at least the major north to south connectivity. And so you'll see this map, and this is just one of the many maps in there. I'm not going into detail on all of them. I just wanted to show how that plays out in the preferred alternatives. You'll see that Spruce becomes really the main corridor for pedestrian and bike to relieve some of that pedestrian activity along especially in the downtown midtown corridor. And so we feel if we improve Spruce Street's pedestrian and bike user friendliness, we can alleviate some of the pressures put there on Hemlock. And then, like I said earlier, if we make it more, people become more cognizant of those alternative paths like our multi-use trail and improve, you'll see that S-curve bypass that connects to the yellow one that is the US 101 to Spruce. If we make those connections, we can solve that north to south connectivity. And it really wouldn't take that much. This was outlined in the earlier bike and trails master plan. And this would just finally take that to the next step and improve those areas in the connectivity from north to south, giving people alternatives. We know we have limited room on the S curves and the shoulder improvements there. We can do some work on that to improve safety there, but it's still not going to be the preferred safe scenario going forward. So what is another alternative? We think this one has a great opportunity to solve that. And must say it's one of the things that I hear most is on the wish list of a lot of people. We also looked in preferred alternatives. Like I said, from the very beginning, we want this to be a full spectrum planning approach. And one of our biggest needs is that if I'll go back to that previous slide, closest assembly area from downtown, if a tsunami or earthquake or something serious happened during that season, during our peak season, closest escape is up to the assembly area where I live up off of Ross and Spruce there, up here by Haystack. That's a long route for anyone, let alone get there in 20 minutes, get there in time for safety of a tsunami, whereas a downtown safety evacuation platform, which could be utilized for other things. And it definitely, as they said this morning, does not have to look like this one. It can be very respective of the village aesthetic. It could be cross-utilized for other uses, whether it's parking, whether it's a watchtower or something like that, but exercise, all kinds of different things. And each other areas are coming up with unique solutions for this. I know there's lots of funding towards this for emergency. And so we put this in there as just one of those other alternatives that we might look into. And then many mobility hubs, another public transportation to help that intermodal connectivity. These mobility hubs can have not only electric charging stations, but it might also, it connects the bus routes and where people, the bus stops, but also have lockers and facilities for people to make those connections and increase connectivity between different modes of transportation. And so we're looking in North Spruce at 2nd Street near the Chamber of Commerce as a possible location, Coolidge Avenue at South Hemlock at Warren Beach down by Fresh Foods in that area. So looking at various locations to try at least one of these out, possibly a combination of a few of them to see how they might help and encourage multimodal travel. And then, like I said, always building a greener and lower emission future by allowing or encouraging these different modes, but also giving electric vehicles a place to recharge. And when we surveyed the public and asked about the different public transit, like I told Kathy, we heard, please increase intercity transit service, add a new bus stop to the north end. We're looking at different locations. We show one in the preferred alternatives, but we've already had some feedback and gotten a couple other alternatives that we may float out there in the next meeting, and then provide frequent circulator shuttles for visitors and for employees. And I'll repeat for Kathy, van pools should be in that mix. I think that's a great idea. And so here's the public transportation preferred alternatives. And I said, topping that list, of course, is that North End bus shelter. All right. And emerging transportation technologies. I think this is one of the more exciting things to look forward to, but it's also something that we should go with caution into. And that's what these policies say. It says policy to encourage potential future scooter/bike share. I think as Eddie explained this morning, it's more that second one, that if we don't have these policies and regulations in place, then somebody might come in here with scooters or bike share programs, and we don't have the proper regulations to say, hey, we don't want that, or we don't want it in this area. So we need to look into that and prepare for that oncoming emerging transportation technologies, because other communities are dealing with this and have been dealing with these things for years, or working and regulating those, and some utilize them to their benefit. I think it was mentioned Haley, Idaho, Wood River Valley has the bike share program up in Ketchum. There's other areas that do the bike share program. And I've heard already many people say they don't want scooters. So I'll have to hear from public to make that pitch, because I've yet to hear a positive towards the scooters for Canyon Beach. But ride-hailing companies and policies toward EV charging stations, like I said, we want to build a more resilient network. So transportation demand management is really what we call those things that parking permit programs, traffic data publicly available, camera parking monitoring program. In other words, hey, go into your phone and finding out what parking's available, and keeping those kind of curb management programs as working that into your parking system and your transportation system. And there's great examples of out there where this works. The old put your quarter in the meter, that's not the only way you do parking nowadays. You can do it on your phone, you can do it from the mobile solutions, and that can have impacts as far away as Portland, where someone could just pull it up on their phone, on what are the alternatives in Cannon Beach for parking and for transportation. Freight. So freight alternatives, not a lot really to discuss there, except for designating short-term loading zones for delivery trucks in commercial areas. I know from working with these fellows that do this, yeah, sometimes, especially during the season, it can become difficult. And so whatever solutions we come up with, if it's the one-way couplets, if it's the mini roundabouts, any of those things, we have to keep freight and those businesses, our chamber, those local downtown businesses, we need to keep them in forefront when we go forward, because getting them their supplies and their keeping them in business, that's the key for this transportation system plan, one of the vital aspects. And then do these projects. So going forward, and what I want to open it up to now is getting comments from you guys on, do these projects adequately address Cannon Beach's transportation needs, motor vehicle traffic, walking, cycling, parking management, et cetera? Which alternatives should be prioritized? And is there anything missing? And before we start answering the folks that have raised hands, I know a lot of people don't like to speak in public. That's why please feel free to reach out to me either by phone or by email. And I'll give my email here in a minute, but it's adams@ci.cannon-beach.or.us. You can always send me an email. And then if you haven't read the Tech Bulletin 6, and you want to look at that preferred alternatives before you speak, feel free to do that. Reach out to me in the coming weeks, and we'll be happy to include your comments and your concerns into the plan as we build that draft TSP. So is anyone out there have any comments, these three, or just want to give us your comments on the TSP project or process so far? All right, Margo.
Hi, good evening. Sorry about that, everyone. I actually keep my camera. I'm on my personal computer, not work. So anyways, there we go. I apologize for that. I just keep a postage stamp over my camera. Anyways, I just want to say thank you so much. I haven't been able to participate personally in these meetings or virtually, but I've been following the project, and I'm very passionate about bicycling and walking. I've lived in Cannon Beach for about 30 years, and I bicycled everywhere in this town before there were even bike routes, including with my children. I had a tandem. I had a son who was very disabled, so I'm sensitive to accessibility and mobility within a community. I used to ride my other son on a tandem on the beach to Cannon Beach Grade School. And I know how dangerous it is to bicycle in this town. I've been yelled at for being on my bicycle, even though I have a little bell on it, like many European countries, including Amsterdam, because there's so many people on the sidewalk and then they're taking up the bike lane. So I'm really excited to see that there might be a through path that goes from the south end to the north end. I live in Tolovana. I try to drive as little as possible into downtown Cannon Beach in the summertime. One, parking is a challenge. I usually only go there to go to the post office. But I'm also afraid of hitting somebody in my car because so many of the tourists, they don't use the crosswalks. I've asked people to use crosswalks. I get yelled at, and I'm very congenial and friendly about it, but they're hiding behind their cars, sometimes with their little children. And then they dart out when they see that there's a break in traffic. And usually it's in front of like Bruce's Candy Kitchen or one of the other places, even though the crosswalk is maybe 10 feet away, 6 feet away. And so I'm just afraid of hitting somebody, quite frankly. And so I'm just excited to actually see this, have the time. I've had this on my calendar since it became available. And I hope that you prioritize the walking cycling paths Because I know for myself, even taking the S curves, I don't follow bicycle rules. I bike against traffic because it's so tight, especially that last curve as you come into Tolovana. People cut that corner and they drive right into the bike lane. And so it's very, very dangerous. So that's all I have to say. And I'm looking forward to seeing this unfold. So thank you and everyone who's been working on this.
Thank you, Margot. And that S curve right where you talk about, I run that 3 times a week and I know how dangerous it is. I run as far to that left side as I can because like you said, they cut that corner and people just, and fair enough to the drivers because you really can't see. It's kind of blind if you're driving down that at times. So yeah, thanks for the comments. All right, Stephen, do you have something? Stephen Daly?
Yeah, Jeff, thank you. What a wonderful presentation. Thanks for the work you guys are doing. I'd like to echo Margot's comments. As a physician, I think it's very important that our community invests in the ability for everyone in the community to exercise and move about safely, trying to minimize their use of vehicles and cars. And so both my wife Kelly and I are, we think a top priority being connecting both the north and south ends of Cannon Beach in a safe way to both bike and walk. And so we're really excited that you put a lot of emphasis on that. So we wanted to encourage that. And the other thing I wanted to throw my support for would be the pedestrian mall. Every city that I've been in with a pedestrian mall becomes sort of the epicenter of people being out and enjoying themselves and being a community. My cousin lives in Boulder. They're a great example, and it's just beautiful to see. I think we could do an excellent job here in Cannon Beach with the pedestrian mall. So again, thank you for your effort and time. I'm really excited the work you're doing for the community.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. And thanks for the Boulder Mall. I was going to reiterate that. I went to CU Boulder. So yeah, that is a great place. It's it is the community and everyone knows. It's funny when we have the emergency, whether it's a tsunami or something, hurricanes back in the South when I lived on the coast of Georgia, people always want to know, where do you go? And those kind of public spaces are the places where people go. That's where they gather. And it's the connective spot for most communities. So thanks for bringing that up. Kathy, do you have something?
Hi, all. Yes, I do. I want to echo what the previous 2 people were saying. For sure that bicycle and pedestrian accessibility is a great priority to start with, and that there's lots of things that will then tangentially add to the community. And since you haven't heard much scooter positive, I'm not going to be really advocating for that, but I just want to say electric scooters and electric bicycle being part of a mobility hub, at least on a small scale, could add a lot of potential mobility options to those people that are not able to physically walk or power a bicycle themselves from the south end to the north end of Cannon Beach. And done in moderation and carefully with the right policies, I think that electric scooters and bike shares could be a great option for Cannon Beach.
Yeah. Well,
So
thanks,
there's your
Kathy.
one positive.
Thank you I like that. What is it? Scooter positive? I love that term. What's funny is I come from, like I said, the coast of the South, and almost all coastal communities in the South have probably more golf carts on their streets than they do bikes. And I was so surprised when I came to the West Coast because they don't do that here. And maybe it's the rain or the conditions, but it is, like you said, a lower emission alternative that scooters and others, and also a more accessible ability issue. So keeping those kind of thoughts, I think we'll see a lot of, if we do get a plaza and all that, we'll see uses of our downtown area change as well. And hopefully if we get parking management and the transportation demand management working together, we might see and making that north to south connectivity more friendly, we will see people change their habits, and who knows, those electric options may be becoming more and more viable by that time. So thanks for bringing that up. Anyone else? Anybody else that hasn't got to speak or would like to comment? Mary Beth. Didn't even see Mary Beth on there. How are you, neighbor?
I'm good. Had to do some clicking there to get unmuted. Yeah, my question is about the mini roundabouts and how friendly they are to pedestrians, because I know I actually learned how to drive in England where roundabouts are common and you are taught how to use a roundabout. But in this country, they're not as common and people seem to have a little bit of a problem knowing what to do. And I'm concerned that they're going to be coming up to this unfamiliar traffic control piece and be so focused on getting around the traffic that they may miss the pedestrian trying to cross. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on how safe a mini roundabout would be for pedestrians.
You know, Mary Beth, I don't want to, I'm no expert in that department, but you know, all I know is my firsthand anecdotal kind of things. We have many roundabouts back in the coastal areas of the South, and they work fine in the areas I know. But I'll take that back to the project management team and make a note to, we'll contact you if we know, you know, have they done anything research-wise on that, and what is the safety? I know it is change. It's all changes. I never thought, for instance, growing up in the South, that I would ever see any kind of roundabouts ever. But yeah, it's the only thing pretty much they put in nowadays down there, and people are adapting to it, I think, all over. And so I'll look into that and see what we can find on that. But that's a good point. Anyone else? All right, well, if not, I'm going to go through the last few slides and then, oh, Randy, let me go ahead and budget. I thought I saw you earlier, so yeah.
Well, while we were talking biking, I'd have two comments. One was, you know, I like the idea of the path that goes around the ponds in the back, but I also believe it'd be helpful to have a path that goes down Ocean Avenue on the west side. I mean, it's basically almost a multi-use path now, and it's much more scenic than Spruce or anything else. And you know, people who come to Cannon Beach and want to walk or bike would much rather be out there on the edge by Ocean. And then the second comment I would have is, you know, the multi-use path seems like it's going to end at Yukon, and biking up the hill to, you know, from Hemlock to the top of Yukon is sort of steep. And just like you guys were just talking, the intersection there at Yukon and the turn as people come down the S curves, people, you know, go fast there and there's not very good visibility. And I would suggest, you know, maybe extending the multi-use path and have it pop out at Nolchena. You know, that would make it an easy access for evacuation of the Ocean Inn and the Stephanie.
Yeah, Randy, I ran that by project management team, and I definitely want to look at that in the next week or two myself, just kind of go out there and scope it out and see also, you know, one of the reasons I think we looked at Yukon was it also works well with the assembly area and transport and getting to those areas, but also kind of the connectivity over to the 101 is really only one property that we believe, you know, might be amenable to some type of easement over there. So it's to look at those kind of things. And then, like you said, the grade and the safety. This is definitely, I think, one of those topics that every time we bring it up, just tonight, for instance, I think the three of the first four said that north-south connectivity is their highest priority or one of their highest. It is over and over again when I talk to people. So it's something that I think will come out of this transportation system plan. And even before we get into that draft phase, I'd like to start kind of scoping out some of the different alternatives. We will definitely keep coming back to the public saying, hey, here's the different pros and cons of each. But I thanks for bringing up the different thoughts, especially from a biker's perspective, because I am not that much of a biker, and I like to bike as much as I can. But like I said, I just don't feel that safe getting north to south. Any other thoughts, Randy?
Yeah, and I have two or three other ones that are, there were things that were brought up back in June in the open houses and things that I haven't seen come back. And so one would be, there was a lot of talk about RV parking and the conflicts that happened there. There was some talk about, the village feel and right-of-way parking, and I don't see anything here. I find it awkward that nothing is being said about Tolovana parking or Ecola Park, either transportation to and from or the parking up there, since they're such big parts of the community. I understand we don't own them, but we should at least have, a perspective of what we'd like to tell the state, I think.
I like that. Yeah, very good points. It hasn't been brought up recently, and with the COLA and kind of the fluctuated state that it's in, we should have some at least policy or preferences of what we would like to see in the future on both of those state parks. All right. Anything else, Randy?
No, that should do.
All right, thanks. And feel free, Randy, always to email me or contact me, okay, if you got others.
Okay.
All right. MH Law 1's iPad.
This is Lila Wickham again, and I just had a. I remember when Greg was running for city council, he talked about software that would identify when the parking was full in the city, and that people could have an app and know you can't come to Cannon Beach right now because there is nowhere to park. And I wonder if you know anything about that option. It would be kind of like at the Portland airport, how you can go to the different levels and it'll say there's no available parking on this level and that sort of thing.
Yes,
Can you speak
definitely.
to that?
Yes, definitely. I briefly mentioned it earlier. I think I just kind of scanned it, but yes, that's one of those kind of parking and transportation demand management systems that are out there. And you can go with, like you said, different versions or different apps, software. But yes, that's often one of the ones used is showing where parking's available. And like you said, you can check that from anywhere. And you can be in Portland, you can be in Hawaii, and you can check to see if there's parking available, or if it's full, or and then also the demand pricing. You can have fluctuating pricing depending on the season, how much it costs. So there's those are all alternatives that we saw a lot of priority for those things that people wanted parking solutions for the summer. I think that's going to be one of those high priorities coming out of that transportation system plan. All right, let me just briefly go through the next few slides, and then if anyone else has anything, we can finalize those. So the next steps will incorporate all previous memos. Like I said, we're up to technical memo 6. We've got documents on goals and policies, existing and future traffic and parking and transportation system, memos in there that run all the models and the data, funding plan, the public input, the preferred alternatives. We'll draft that into a TSP. And with that, then we will come back to public meetings. And in those, we'll also have an online open house in March. We'll get that word out for that. Please visit the CannonBeachTSP.com. If you are on this meeting and you didn't receive a email blast from us, please email me at adams@ci and say, please put me on the list, and we'll blast it every time we put out something new. And so when we finalize that, technical memo 6 is still in draft. Once we finalize that, we'll also blast word of that out. So that's kind of a way to keep in touch and keep connected to things. We'll get that date scheduled pretty quickly here for our March online open house. And what that'll be, it won't be like this. It won't be an in-person or a Zoom type of thing. This will be another one of those things where you go through, see what the preferred alternatives have come out to, and then any kind of input you might have. There'll be a survey component to that. And so we'll also then be starting that draft TSP process. That'll be late March, early April for that. And that will be a full joint session, public session with a planning commission and the city council with public hearing phases as part of that. I want to, before I'll keep the line open if anybody else wants to talk, but I want to thank everyone for their time, and remember that you'll be able to pass this along. If anyone else would like to see it, just refer them to either City of Cannon Beach's website, which, as with all of our meetings, has the tape versions. If you just go to that agenda date or that meeting, you'll find usually the very next day a feed of that Zoom meeting. And then we also can go to the CannonBeachTSP.com, which has all the materials for the transportation project. I appreciate everybody's feedback and staying a part of this. I know these planning projects can be long and especially in the Zoom and COVID conditions where we don't get to be in-person interactive, but it does make a difference. I mean, every time we come back, we hear new things, whether it's van pools, whether it's, hey, take a different look rather than going up Yukon or wherever, go try this. We're learning with each one of these, and we really don't get that from just planners getting in the room together and planning. We need the public's input, those people that use the system every day, and it's important to stay a part of this process, and we appreciate that. Let me check to see if anybody else is on maybe phones that can't raise their hand. Jan, let me see if Jan, do you have anything?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a lot of things, but I'm going to try to write you an email with a lot of the points. But one point I'd like to ask tonight is, why is there a concern for needing another bus stop in the North End when we have such a lovely shelter and there's, access there at Les Shirley Park?
They're wanting one that is more visible and serves the inner city connector more, not the in-town type of connections. That's my understanding.
And coming to Les Shirley Park doesn't allow it to connect with other things? Well,
from my understanding, what they're looking at now is putting it more towards around where the school would be. So when they upgrade the school into the kind of a community facility, a meeting facility, that there would be one there. So it would serve as kind of an inner city connector position.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jan. Anybody else? All right, Randy.
Something came to mind a while ago that, one of the assumptions is there's some number of residents or some number of employees who use the public parking on busy days. And nobody seems to know, is that a lot? Is that a little? What happens? And so I'm wondering is when you did your parking surveys, you did one on a weekday, you did one on a weekend. Is there any way to go back and look to see that, was the same car parked on the weekday and the weekend, in the public parking kind of area for more than 2 hours? Because if it's the same person on, last Tuesday and then it's this Saturday, it's got to be a high probability it's either a resident or an employee.
Yeah, I can verify this with Owen and the parking folks that did the survey, but I think that they did do that analysis because they could do down to that detail for areas. And I don't think they found, I think that there were instances, but I don't think they found a level of, where it was being abused. But I'll verify that, Randy, and I'll email you or connect you with Owen, and he can tell you that data. Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks.
That's just my recollection of it, but I'll make sure. Okay.
It'd be nice to know data as opposed to everybody's got conjectures.
Oh yeah.
Nobody does it, or yes, they do it. And
I hear the conjecture every day, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a good night. And we'll be in touch here in March when we start back for the next phase. All right. Thank you.